Hi friends, welcome to episode 4 of Kinder Every Day. This week, if you're unaware or watching this in the future, a woman named Sarah Everard went missing on her walk home through London from a friend's house, and a few days later was found dead in Kent. The alleged perpetrator has been remanded into custody. He's a police officer with multiple recent accusations of indecent exposure. And obviously this is a massive tragedy that has sparked some very justified discussion around both on social media and in the news. And I wanted to report on some of that because I've been listening and I've learned a few things that have shifted my perspective somewhat on the danger posed to women, like generally, just from going about living their lives. I want to start with a statistic. According to a survey of UK women commissioned by the UN Women UK in January of this year, 2021, over 70% of women in the UK, I think it was 71% exactly, say they've experienced sexual harassment in public, and 97% of women aged 18 to 24 have experienced at least some of the behaviors that were asked about in the survey. This is source number 1 down below if you want to click through and have a look. 97%. I knew that, sexual harassment was a problem. I knew that street harassment was a problem. I knew that women were vulnerable, generally, to this stuff. I didn't know it was 97% of people. Almost no woman is victimless to some form of harassment or assault. That is appalling, absolutely absurd. I honestly completely has taken me aback. Even as someone who, I previously considered myself reasonably aware of the problems facing women in this regard. Obviously not as aware as any woman would be, because I'm not one. I'm a cis male. I had no idea the magnitude was that great. A lot of the conversation that has come out of people discussing the events of Sarah Everard's abduction and death, and discussing their own experiences around that, has focused on how women take so many precautions to attempt to even the odds, to attempt to stay safe when they're going around. And a lot of society's kind of response to stories of sexual assault, stories of women being murdered, tends to focus around this stuff. Oh, don't go out at night. So this is sometimes official guidance. I think the UK police have even issued some, warning against going out at night for women, which is that's a curfew, right? That's a huge curtailment of freedom, and it's being placed on the victims of these crimes, not on the perpetrators, right? There's women carry their keys in their hand so they can attack someone with it. They might carry rape alarms or pepper spray. Sometimes women will text friends when they leave and text again when they get home, or pretend to have a phone call across the road to avoid somebody, not wear clothing that catches attention. There's this laundry list of things. And you know what? Sarah Everard did all of those things and was still hurt and was still murdered. Like, for all of the for all of this victim blaming, I guess, to call it what it is, tends to take pride of place in, at least in the news and in official discourse, and advice from governments. It doesn't even help. The vast majority, I don't have a statistic to hand for this, but the majority of sexual assaults are conducted by people the victim already knows. A lot of domestic violence has spiked during the pandemic as people are spending more time indoors. So a lot of women are vulnerable even at home. But according to this, the survey I quoted earlier, 97% of women aged 18 to 24 report having received sexual harassment in public. the I want to say the obvious air quotes thing that needs to change is that men need to take more responsibility for this stuff. I and I admit as a man I find this very difficult um, to start on. How do I? It's sometimes hard to know whether people you trust might have might you know decide to do something horrendous one day, might have that dark undercurrent under the surface, or might have a misapprehension that leads to them making a mistake that really, really hurts another human being. Um, because the understanding of consent and the understanding of the vulnerability of women among men is really low. Um, as I said, this information and the fact that like these precautions are taken so much by so many women, at least according to the discussions I've seen around it. My Twitter feed is full of people talking about this stuff. So many women, almost every woman takes this into account, as far as I can tell, and it doesn't help. 97% of women aged 18 to 24 have experienced sexual harassment in public, of some form, according to this study, and 71% of all women. So clearly, although hashtag not all men are necessarily perpetrators, there's such a huge gulf between caring about women's safety, genuinely, with all your heart, genuinely caring, and actually understanding how women deal with it and what women go through every day, and how unsafe women actually are and how unsafe they feel. I want to quote a similar study. So in 2016, another UK organization, the Trade Union Commission, partnered up with the Everyday Sexism Project to study sexual harassment at work, and they found that 52% of the women they polled have experienced some form of sexual harassment at work. So even in a place where there are other people around, there's in theory a structure of authority, and consequences for this stuff. There's superiors to report people to. It still happens to a huge number of people, and they get it. Presumably, these behaviors continue. I.e., the first study I mentioned, the UN Women UK one, also goes into detail on reporting, and they found that only 4% of women told them that they reported the incidents of harassment to an official organization. 45% of women said they didn't believe reporting would help change anything. 4% of these crimes go reported. And there are plenty of anecdotes and stories about cases of sexual harassment or sexual assault being difficult to convict. Often, there are lots of reports of police brushing off women coming to them for help, or re-engaging in this victim blaming, or what were you wearing, were you drunk at the time, almost making excuses for the perpetrator. This has to stop in some way, and it has to come from men somehow. I don't know if I have a solution for you. I'm thinking about it myself. I just wanted to kind of help spread this information because it is shocking, and has really kind of overhauled my understanding of this dynamic and how much women take care of their safety all the time and how little effect it actually has. I excuse me. I think that making sure that if talking to your male friends and keeping an eye on them, like calling out unsavory behavior when you see it, or discussing these events with your male friends if you can. Those are healthy. There's things I'm trying to work on myself, and those will make a difference. Teaching kids consent in school, and obviously later on now educating the general public about consent, is very important, I think. But I've heard anecdotally that it's not even easy to get schools to accept consent teachings, or make them truly sink in for kids who will still continue to harass each other. So clearly more needs to be done there. But we want to get to the point where women's safety and bodily autonomy is respected and maintained by everybody, not just by women. Last night I went to an online vigil for Sarah Everard, an event where I won't go into too much detail about it because it was a private space, but it was a gathering of about an hour where different people spoke about their experiences and their knowledge and their feelings, and it was extremely powerful and obviously extremely moving. And it was astounding to see again so many voices echoing these same concerns of safety and victim blaming and disrespect and a lack of support from a largely uncaring legal system. I think there's, at least specifically for the UK, I think there's a widespread belief that the UK is some sort of like good place. I know I believed this when I was younger, that it was like a relatively progressive country, which I guess by global standards maybe it is, or at least has been. But regardless of whether the UK is better or worse than anywhere else, even setting aside the UK's horrendous colonialist past, and how it takes advantage of that status to this day, the UK is not a safe place for women. Never mind, the rampant transphobia is present in this country, the racism that has been, played up and preyed on to push through Brexit. The UK is a horrendously unsafe and uncaring place for women and minorities of any walk of life. And I know that it's not the only country that applies to. We can and should do better, and it needs to start with, or continue with, I guess, because women have been working on this stuff for years, but men need to pick up the slack in some way. And if anyone has ideas on how I can help, please let me know, because I'm trying to, like I said, I'm very much learning about this myself. I don't have the magical answers for you, and this is a way that I would like to try and help, just to spread the word a little bit, and do my part to share some of this information. So yeah. Another thing actually I'd like to call out is you occasionally see people say things like, oh, I didn't really get it until I had a daughter. Fathers feeling protective of their female children. This kind of mindset, I know this sounds like a bit of a straw man argument. I've just seen this in a few places, and I wanted to call out something specific that it highlights. It's very difficult for like the human brain, as far as I know. Don't take this as like, I'm not a neurologist. Don't take this as gospel. But as I understand it, it's quite difficult for the human brain to really conceive of and empathize with experiences of people who aren't like us. We kind of default to assuming everyone is ourselves, our individual selves, unless, until otherwise specified. And I know that like how that has affected me is that as a guy, even a guy who was like, I have always cared and believed that women should be equal, but it has taken me years to even start learning the ways in which they are not. And that applies double for, people of color and trans people and so on. Like people who I've always, in theory, supported. I've never been pro like turning refugees away or pro like bathroom segregation or whatever. I've never been in favor of any of that stuff. But like, did I know it was even happening for a large portion of my life? Absolutely not. Did I know that women were under this much danger until very recently? Absolutely not. And my my attempts to like engage with, oh, I've made another entire video about this, but my attempts to engage with um, feminism during like my university years were frankly absolutely embarrassing in retrospect. Like, even for people who consider themselves good men or consider themselves like egalitarian or whatever, you still have to learn exhaustively and in detail all of the ways in which you are unaware that things are bad, that things are broken, or that people are unsafe and in danger and discriminated against. Um, and for me, it has taken a lot of time of like listening to people's stories. In this case, listening to women's stories, and I'm still, still learning stuff. This week, I've learned more. I've learned the depth of the problem is far greater than I thought. So circling back to like I didn't get it until I had a daughter thing. The people who say stuff like that, at a guess, maybe they don't really understand the depth. They don't really understand like the life experiences of women until they are forced to take charge of one, right? By having a daughter, by trying to keep their daughter safe, and by spending all of their time. And like, God, I feel bad for these people's partners, assuming they have partners who are women. Like, it took you that time. But that's, to some extent, that is how the human brain works. If you're watching this and you're a man and you're thinking, man, it can't be this bad, right? I have been there. You are wrong, and that's okay. You're like, I continue to be incredibly uninformed about like 99% of all this stuff, and to an extent, regardless of how much I try and empathize and how much I think about it and how much I feel about it or listen about it, I'll never have this experience, right, in the same way. I will never feel I have that privilege, right? I don't have to go through this myself. There will be times when I am unsafe, but not in the same, like being afraid of men in general because any of them could be the perpetrator, right? There was a common thing I've heard from women recently in discussing about this is that feeling of like, I could be next, right? That feeling of you're walking down a dark street, someone approaches from the other side, it's a man. Is, most of the time you're going to pass each other and nothing will happen. But only one of those two people is thinking, am I dead? Like, is this it? Is this where I go? And sometimes, tragically, sometimes they are. And so women will keep their keys in their hand and stay on the phone to somebody and tell someone when they left and try and stick to well-lit areas, try not to go running alone at night. And the bloke just walks on. And a lot of the time, and I'm sure I've done this, a lot of people don't even think about it. Because why would you? Just walking past someone on the street, just doing your own thing. One thing you can do, actually, if you find yourself in this situation, one thing I've found, one thing that I do sometimes myself and I've heard people say is actually actively helpful. If you're a man on your own walking somewhere and a woman on her own comes towards you, cross the road, get out of their way. Like, it's, even if you don't have a reason to cross the road, like, it sounds silly, but that person is probably afraid a lot of the time by the sound of it, and you can at least be like the one person they didn't have to worry about, right? You can be the person who showed a good example. No, I'm safe. I'm going to get out of your way because I know how you're feeling and I'm not going to be able to convince you otherwise. So I'm going to get out of the way. And you can show that respect and show that care to a stranger and help them just a little bit. And from what I've heard of anecdotes from women, that makes a difference. Like, if men kind of get out of the way, essentially. You don't have to make a big song and dance about it. Just cross the road and have it so that you're not passing close to them. Obviously, if it's a group of people, it's not as bad. But if you're, walking towards someone who's on their own and might be vulnerable, cross the road, give them space, and it's a way of letting someone know that, like, hey, at least, I understand what you go through. I understand what might be going through your mind right now, and I'm going to be safe. I'm going to let you know that I'm safe. So, if you want to dig further into the two surveys I quoted, they'll be in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and take care of each other. Believe women, listen to women, and let's do what we can to to make the streets safer for our population. Thank you.